Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel says it will respond to Iran's unprecedented air attack, while Congress pushes for more funding for Israeli defense. Plus, a mother's tenacious love, telling her son's story about being wounded at the Nova Festival and dragged into captivity. And blessing Israel, how CBN partners are helping a single mom with a special needs son. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Tensions are high in the Middle East as the world waits to see Israel's response to the Iranian air attack against it over the weekend. This successful defensive action by Israel and the U.S.-led coalition also has not escaped the world's notice. And as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, the battle in Gaza continues.
Israel says there's no doubt it will respond to the unprecedented drone and missile attack by Iran.
Iran will face the consequences for its actions. We will choose our response accordingly.
The question is how and when. Reserve Brigadier General Amir Avivi tells CBN News they presented plans for striking back even before the attack.
These plans really can be from, cyber attacks to destroying nuclear plants to completely wiping out the oil production of Iran, sinking their navy. There are so many possibilities.
Still, the White House continues to press Israel not to take retaliation too far.
We don't want to see a war with Iran. We don't want to see a broader regional conflict. We will do what we have to do to defend Israel.
We're committed to a ceasefire that will bring the hostages home and preventing conflict from spreading beyond what it already has.
Avivi says although Israel can hit Iran in many ways, there's something bigger at stake.
One of the considerations is that Israel, of course, would rather see a buildup of a coalition.
Israel's successful defense is due to a coalition that included Arab nations like Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Jordanian planes took part in shooting down the massive waves of drones headed for Israel. The Jerusalem Post reports Saudi Arabia acknowledged its part in the coalition. It's also blaming Iran for instigating the October 7th attack by Hamas to thwart normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The fragile coalition is part of a U.S.-led effort to build a Middle East alliance that recognizes the danger that Shia Iran poses to Sunni Muslim nations and Israel. In an article in the Wall Street Journal, one U.S. official said the Abraham Accords made a significant difference by allowing the countries to work together openly.
Israel's defense was strengthened by a coalition of countries led by the United States and working together.
Avivi says the coalition, which also included Britain and France, understood they could be next.
The U.S. see ballistic missiles flying more than 1,000 kilometers in 10 minutes towards Israel. They understand they're next. These ballistic missiles can reach Europe. They will reach also the U.S. And in a year or two, they can be nuclear. So we need to deal decisively with this threat from Iran and really build a coalition that will be willing to pose a military threat and deal with these challenges.
While the U.S. says it won't take part in a strike on Iran, it's committed to defending Israel. Meanwhile, protesters blocked roads and bridges in multiple cities across the U.S., protesting Biden's support for Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Iran's recent attack on Israel has changed the Middle East irrevocably, just as people have said that Israel was changed forever after October 7th. So Iran's attack also changed the country. Here's a conversation I had in the hours after the attack with former UN ambassador and current member of Knesset, Danon. Take a look. Ambassador Danon, tell us your reaction to last night's attack by Iran.
Well, last night we saw our defense system in action. We are very proud of the capabilities, of the results, but it's not enough. We have to show also our offensive capabilities in order to create deterrence in the region against Iran. They attacked a sovereign country with 300 rockets, missiles, and UAVs, and we cannot sit idly by. So we will have to calculate our next step My position is that we have to hit them hard to teach them a lesson that they will not do it again.
What kind of response would you expect from Israel?
Well, I think we have a variety of options. It can be an attack on their proxies or attack on Iran. My position is that because they attacked us from Iran and they chose not to use their proxies, we have to retaliate back at Iran, target those facilities who actually launched the attack against Israel. It's unprecedented. If we don't do that today, it will mean that we accept the equation of Iranian missiles flying into Israel. That's unacceptable.
The United States seems to asking Israel to restrain itself. What's your reaction to that?
We respect the U.S. We are grateful for the support we received last night with defending our civilians. But at the same time, we are here to stay. We have to deal with the threat of Iran. For the U.S., it's easy to come and say what to do or not what to do. But if you look at history, whenever we ignore the requests of the U.S., it was for the benefit not only of Israel, but also for the American people. If you look at the attack on the nuclear reactor in Iraq or the attack on the nuclear reactor in Syria, we took bold decisions without the support of the U.S., but it benefited the entire world.
What do you see going forward, Ambassador?
Well, I think we have to punch back. We have to send a clear message to our enemies in Tehran. They saw that they have superiority over us, but we proved them wrong last night. They will feel the might of the IDF, and hopefully it will lead to some kind of deterrence in the future.
What kind of cooperation have you seen from maybe some of the Abraham Accord countries and even Jordan?
Well, I will not go into details, but I will say that the threat of Iran is a threat not only to Israel, but to all the moderate Arab countries. The Iranians, if you look at the psychology of the Iranian leaders, they feel superiority, not only against Christians or Jews, but also against the Muslims themselves, the Sunnis. So I think last night they were very happy and proud to see the effective of our defense system.
Ambassador Danon, any final thoughts?
No, I want to thank all those who pray for us and stand with us. I think last night what we saw was the hands of God protecting Israel as well.
Coming up, options for Israel's next move. CBN's Gordon Robertson talks with military analyst Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan Conricus' 24 years as a combat commander and his service as an IDF spokesman has given him unique military insight. He spoke with CBN President Gordon Robertson about Iran's recent air attack and the next moves that may be imminent.
This was a watershed moment in Middle Eastern history. Iran came out the shadows for the first time, did an unprecedented attack against Israel, an attack that, of course, must be met with equal or superior firepower from Israel. In my mind, there's no question about it. What really is important, in my mind, are a few things. One, what's the Israeli plan and what's the strategic objective that we want to achieve? Two is to create the partnership and a coalition by which Israel won't be fighting Iran alone, but will have the at least passive support, if not active participation, of other countries in the region. And third, very importantly, to have U.S. support. I do not think that Israel wants a single U.S. soldier to be involved in that, airman or sailor. We don't want American soldiers to be in harm's way, but Israel definitely needs U.S. support in order to take this battle back towards Iran and to really chart a new path for the Middle East after this tremendous aggression by Iran.
Should one of the strategic goals be the elimination of Iran's nuclear capability? Should that be first and foremost?
When Israel goes ahead and retaliates against Iran, my hope is that it will be under a logic that aims either for their nuclear military capabilities or for their regional terrorist capabilities or for both. I think that both are very important targets that need to be taken out by Israel. And again, it should be part of a strategic plan, not just a retaliation for the sake of retaliation. That isn't worth much, but really a strategic Israeli plan that has local, regional, and then global support, because Israel is used to fighting against evils of the world, and it's used to doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Well, let's talk about another strategic goal, which you've already mentioned, and it's that is regional cooperation, recognizing Iran is the major threat to peace in the Middle East. Some view that the Hamas had a goal of stopping the Abraham Accords, and that was the intent in its timing of October 7th. I've heard some analysts say the main goal here from Iran is to show Jordan's hand, that if Jordan participated in the defense, that would now be an excuse to go in and attack Jordan and depose the king. What's your view?
The modus operandi of the Iranians is to find social and ethnic and religious fault lines in countries, exasperate them and make situations worse, and then go in and destabilize countries. That's what they did in Syria. That is what they're doing in Lebanon. That's what they did in Gaza. And that's what they did in Yemen. By that logic, Jordan is vulnerable to Iranian efforts and Iranian attacks, but Jordan so far has been very strong and resilient against these attempts by Iran. Jordan is an important country. It's a U.S. ally. It is an Israeli ally. We have peace with Jordan. And 2 nights ago, Jordan made a very clear decision to first and foremost defend its own airspace, not to allow a foreign country violate its airspace and possibly threaten its citizens and facilities. And it also did a good and smart thing because it fought on the right side. I don't think that the primary objective of the Iranians was to expose Jordan, but I do think that the Iranian puppeteers and terror masters have been eyeing Jordan for quite a while, and they're looking for social tensions to exasperate.
Let's talk about Iranian intentions. It seems like they wanted to respond to the attack on the embassy in Syria. You can debate whether it was an embassy or a military headquarters. But they had to do something. Do you think they actually intended to fail so that they could have a response, but then Israel wouldn't be justified in a counterattack?
I personally don't think so, because if that's a move, it's a silly move, and the Iranians are usually not silly people. They're cold. They are very calculated, and they're strategic thinkers. You do not send 350 pieces of very advanced weaponry from about 1,000 miles away in order to fail. That doesn't make sense. And they sent a lot, about 60 tons of explosives Israel's way. And yeah, I think that they would assume that Israeli air defenses would be able to pick some of them out of the sky. I don't think that the Iranians thought that 99% of the incoming rockets and missiles would be intercepted. And I do not think that they wanted to fail.
Well, Iranian media is actually showing B-roll from California wildfires and claiming that's what's going on in Israel today as a result of the attack. So it is kind of comical. If they really did intend to hurt Israel and the complete failure of the attack, what does that say about their military capability? Would they ever be able to launch any serious attack against Israel?
Yeah, I wouldn't want us to sit here and wait for them to have the ability to get their act together. I think that Israel should, take smart and swift and powerful measures, to make sure that this never happens again, and to send a very strong message to Iran that this is totally not tolerable.
Let's turn our attention to Gaza, because the world's attention now is far from it. But what's going to happen now with the planned invasion of Rafah?
Well, that is a very good question, and one that Israeli decision makers really have to answer to. I know that the Israeli public is very eager for this as well. We have unfinished business in Gaza. Hamas still stands and exists, which it must not be allowed to. And Rafah has still not been visited by Israeli troops by and large. What I know is military reality. Israel has to go into Rafah. It has to dismantle the tunnels where all of the weapons come into Gaza from, and it has to defeat Hamas so that we can start rebuilding the Gaza Strip.
Up next, a mother's wrenching story about her wounded son kidnapped and taken to Gaza. There are more than 130 Israeli hostages still in Hamas captivity. Among them are 8 Americans with dual citizenship. 23-year-old Hershs Goldberg Poland is one of them. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl spoke with Hersh's mom, Rachel, to hear about her son and his kidnapping.
Rachel, mother of Hershs Goldberg Poland, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. Your son is in Hamas captivity, but tell us a little bit about Hershs.
So Hershs is a laid-back, fun-loving, funny with a dry, dark sense of humor. He was planning a 2-year trip around the world, and his ticket was for December 27th, 2023. God willing, he will come home and get the treatment that he needs, and one day he will go on that trip. On October 4th, a Wednesday, the Wednesday before this, went up north in Israel to go to a music festival that was happening up north. But on Friday the 6th, he called in the afternoon and he said, "You won't believe it. They're closing this music festival and I'm coming home." He said, "But the good news is that I could go to synagogue with you and I'll come to Shabbat dinner afterwards." He said, "But I am going to meet with my friend Aner Shapira and we're going to go do something fun after dinner." And then right around 11 o'clock, he kissed John, he kissed me. He even hugged our hostess and said thank you. And he looked at me very casually and he said, "Love you, see you tomorrow." And the next morning, right around 8 o'clock, the bomb sirens started to go off here in Jerusalem, which is unusual. And normally on the Jewish Sabbath, I don't use my phone, I don't use technology. So we didn't know what exactly was going on, but I knew that Hershs and Aner were sleeping outside somewhere. And I said to my girls, I'm turning on my phone, and 2 WhatsApps popped up that had come in at 8:11 simultaneously, 2 in a row. The first one said, "I love you," and the second one said, "I'm sorry." I immediately knew something horrible was happening, and I knew he knew that something horrible was happening, and that's why he was apologizing. And I tried calling him back, and I tried writing to him. And what we came to find out from witnesses is that Hershs and Aner were at the Nova Music Festival, and when the festival came under attack, the boys and 2 other friends escaped to a car and tried to come north back to Jerusalem. The road was lined with Hamas gunmen who were shooting at point-blank range through the windshields and killing everybody in the cars. So Hershs and Aner and their 2 friends made a U-turn and started to go south, but then they were driving directly into the rocket fire. So they and many others abandoned their cars and went running into roadside bomb shelters. Hershs and Aner ended up in a 5-foot by 8-foot bomb shelter. There were 29 of them in that bomb shelter. Hamas came to the doorway and were tossing in hand grenades, but Aner kept picking them up and throwing them out, picking them up and throwing them out. He was successful 7 times, and tragically on the 8th time, the bomb exploded in his hand and killed him. And then Hamas came to the doorway and they threw in 3 hand grenades, and they were just firing machine gun fire into the room. So most of those young people were dead. The witnesses we spoke to were trapped underneath the dead bodies. So they could pretend to be dead. They were covered in blood and body parts. They said after a couple minutes of the dust settling, Hamas entered. There were 4 young men who were on the opposite wall who were all wounded but clearly alive. And they were ordered to stand up. And when they stood up, that's when these witnesses who were hiding under the dead bodies told us that Hersh's left arm from the elbow down had been blown off. There's a piece where you see Hershs and a couple other boys being marched from the bomb shelter, being loaded onto the pickup truck at gunpoint. And you see when Hershs goes to sit down, the stump where his left arm used to be You see these other people also being loaded onto the pickup truck and taken into the direction of Gaza.
Do you know anything about whether he maybe got medical treatment or anything like that?
We were told by those hostages who were released that their first stop was for medical treatment when they were taken into Gaza. They probably didn't anticipate to have 252 hostages. We are hopeful that he was treated. And so we are hopeful that, and we are told to continue to pray that no news means good news.
Still ahead, CBN Israel providing practical help, making all the difference for a single mother. Imagine the day-to-day responsibilities of a mother with a young child with cerebral palsy. Then imagine that mother fleeing her home country with her children because of war. Thanks to our partners, CBN Israel was able to lighten the load of one Ukrainian mother as she settled into a new life in Israel with her family.
This is Natalia and Dima. They arrived in Israel following the war in Ukraine. And Dima suffers from cerebral palsy and some other developmental setbacks. They also haven't been able to have health insurance since being here due to the refugee situation. We are working to be able to help them to have proper equipment for Dima to care for him.
The situation back home was tense. The fighting continued. I decided that I would try to give my children a better future. My son Dima is a child with special needs. He was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at the age of 3 months. Ever since then, we would be in the hospital every month and a half.
After the difficulties in Ukraine, Natalia was able to get help to take better care of Dima in Israel. He was admitted to a special school where he receives therapy.
In order to transport Dima, we needed a specialized wheelchair. Without it, I had to take him to school by myself.
Dima's need of a specialized wheelchair was met thanks to CBN Israel's generous supporters.
I had trouble giving my son showers because he can't sit up on his own. It was stressful for him and he would be scared to go into the bathroom. You also got us the bathing chair and now it will be a lot easier.
Working together with CBN partners allows us to better put to use the resources that our supporters provide.
I am so happy to see that in the world there are still people willing to help. I can't express how grateful we are.
For Natalia and her family, your gifts have made a big difference and provided much-needed stability as they settle in their new country.
When I first came to Israel, it was difficult. I didn't know anything, but CBN came along and it was as if I grew wings. I was filled with hope. I now look forward to the future. Your generous gifts have restored my faith in humanity.
What a wonderful way for CBN partners to bless Israel by blessing its newcomers in need. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. You can follow us on social media and access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and the protection of Israel in this critical moment, and continue to lift up the IDF soldiers, all those caught in harm's way, and the hostages still in Gaza. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.